What if God were as petty as us? I got kind of excited about that whole petty thought, that the idea and the concept of pettiness. Like in this day and age, living with all the reality TV that we have and all the social media and all the dumb gangsters and the opportunity to say what you want hidden behind an electronic device and nobody knows your face, so you can just let off and sound off on somebody and say the most vile and ignorant things that you would never have the courage to say to that person to their face for fear of pain in your face. We live in such a petty world, and it's getting pettier by the day, and it's getting more petty by the younger generation. And to think, what if God were as petty as us? Like, just for example, say if you forgot to say your grace over your cereal this morning and he was petty, oh, you're gonna choke on every spoonful of that cereal because you didn't thank him for it. What if he were as petty as us and, we didn't ask for traveling mercies to get here and we got caught by every single red light just because. And then at every red light, a bird hit your windshield and decided to leave his remains at every red light just because. That's petty. But then I got thinking, well, then there's multiple definitions of the word petty. So to look it all up, let me see, I did my little scholarly thing. And the definition of petty, as far as the Oxford Dictionary, petty is considered an adjective, and it means of little importance or trivial. It also can mean of secondary or lesser importance, rank, or scale, or something minor. But then I'm like, well, that doesn't have anything to do with or the relation that I see it on a day-to-day basis, because I think of petty as an action word. So I did some more research and I kept going and I was like, well, what does petty mean? And we call people petty. So that means that they have to be doing something in order for that name to fit who they are or something about them. And so I put in the question, what does it mean to be petty? And I got from the Cambridge English Dictionary, selfish and mean, especially because of having too much interest in a small or an unimportant matter. So then I said, well, what do we call people who are petty? Because, sometimes we can have petty names, we call them. And then sometimes we can call somebody petty and they don't even know we're calling them that word because we used our SAT words. And then dictionary.com said that a petty person is also synonymous with being nugatory, negligible, inconsiderable, slight, small, stingy, or miserly. So you might think that you're saving something or you're doing that whole rainy day saving thing, but we always do that Monday morning quarterbacking, or when hindsight is 2020 and we can look back and see how things are more clear after a situation plays itself out. And we held on to something and we squeezed Lincoln's nose on that penny till it bled, and we didn't even need to. So were we being petty in not being appreciative of blessings? Is our thought process petty? Because we're minimizing who he is and who we are in him. Pray with me. Dear Dad, I'm trying to come to my brothers and sisters and give them a message that you have placed upon my heart. this is a fun and interesting concept that can go many, many ways, but Dad, I want you to use me as a conduit for what it is that you want them to hear and for what you want to be said, and hide me behind the cross so that I, in essence, am preaching to myself too. Please let everything that I say reign and resonate within each heart and mind within this room, and for all those hearts and minds who are outside of this room or who are under the sound of my voice now and in the future. Go with us, keep us, and open our minds and hearts to be receptive. In your son's name I pray, amen. So I did like more of this whole research thing, because then I was like, well, different perspectives of people consider different things to be petty. So I text a couple of friends and cousins, both male and female, just so that I could get like the complete picture of what pettiness is. And so then I came to with the question of, well, is calling someone petty an insult? Some people don't take too kindly to be calling anything other than the name on their birth certificate, whereas others, namely a person who we all have had the fortune of knowing in a widespread way over the previous 4 years, basked in the glow of being petty every day, to the point where I don't think he got no sleep because he was trying to think of the next petty thing to do. So is calling someone petty an insult? And then this is when I got this little historical blurb from the New York Times Magazine, and it said, petty literally means small. The word derived or evolved from the French word petite in the late 14th century. And then a century later, it had, it corralled into a belittling insult, referring to issues of small importance or to small-minded people. And to call other people petty could be to reduce them or to swat them away in an effort to elevate yourself. So then here we go again, the 6 one way, half a dozen the other. Who's petty? You are the person you're calling petty, because you might just be calling them petty so that you become larger in essence. So if I was to be considered petty, am I being childish? Urban Dictionary defines petty as making things, events, or actions that normal people dismiss as trivial or insignificant into excuses to be upset or to be uncooperative or to just be childish or stubborn. It further defines it as a person who is purposely childish with the intent of eliciting a reaction, or someone who does something in an attempt to hurt another person, but really it only makes them look more stupid. So simply being annoying and actively being annoying means that that individual has a void within themselves that they are announcing to the world in uncertain terms so that they can receive attention by dimming someone else's light and amplifying their noise, because that's all it is at the end of the day, is just noise. So then a petty person is really a hurt person, because hurt people hurt people. So when we encounter or come across petty people, do we dismiss them? Do we cast them aside and ignore that small thing that they're doing to just be an annoyance and that mosquito in your ear? Or do you give them a measure of attention in order to foster healing within them? But then that's only effective if they're willing to let it be effective. Our scripture lesson came from 2 Timothy 2:23 and 24. And Sister Karen read it for us in the clear word and in the New King James. Okay. I have it here in the Amplified version. And it says, but have nothing to do with foolish and ignorant speculations. And in brackets, it has useless disputes over unedifying, stupid controversies, since you know that they produce strife and give birth to quarrels. Verse 24, the servant of the Lord must not participate in quarrels, but must be kind to everyone, meaning even-tempered, persevering peace, and he must be skilled in teaching, patient, and tolerant when wronged. And I always like to, no matter what I'm doing, I always refer back to the Message version sometimes, because for me, it reads as a novel and gives me a little bit more clarity or insight. And the Message version of that same scripture says, run away from childish indulgence. And remember, we said that being petty is also being childish, because you're pulling out those loud, clamoring emotions to evoke emotion from another person, and you're not particularly wanting a positive response. So run away from that childish indulgence. Run after mature righteousness, faith, love, peace, joining those who are in honest and serious prayer before God, and refuse to get involved in inane discussion. They always end up in a fight. God's servant must not be argumentative, but a gentle listener and a teacher who keeps cool, working firmly but patiently with those who refuse to obey. You never know how or when God might sober them up with a change of heart and a turning to the truth, enabling them to escape the devil's trap where they are caught and held captive, forced to run his errands. So even in their pettiness, they're not even in control of themselves. But in following Christ and in being that true Christian, be ye also ready for when that person makes that switch, that you're able to jump on that teachable moment. So I'm thinking about like Christ and some of the experiences that he had even while he walked the face of the earth thousands of years ago. And first off, when I saw petty too, like sometimes when you have a word and you don't quite know how it fits to how it would be best used as a life application, you can use it or put it into an acronym. And so to start off, petty for me, I decided sounded like poisonous energy targeted and terrorizing you because it's somebody else's poison that they have honed in, flipped, turned, and then made you the target so that they can terrorize your peaceful state of mind with their childishness. And yet, in hearing that, it seems or sounds like those of us who have common sense, which, common sense can't be taught. But for those of us who have common sense, we wouldn't indulge in that type of thing. We'd be like, oh my gosh, we'd be able to like pick that thing out. It'd be right, red flashing lights glaring. You would see the petty person coming a mile down the road and you wouldn't even engage. But yet and still, we have a magnet right here. And the magnet finds those petty people. And for some reason, we are not polar opposites. So for it to be such a negative, loud, obvious, emotional remote control, we allow the other people to have that remote control to our emotions, and they just sit there and do this all day long. And we ran through 122 satellite channels in 30 seconds because we've let them push that button. And at the end of the day, we wonder why we're so tired and didn't do nothing. Because you've not been in control of your own peace of mind over the smallest things. Your neighbor put his trash cans out a day ahead of time, and I'm so sick of him doing that because every time and he does that and I go to back out my driveway, I cannot see what's coming down the road, and he know the trash man don't come until Wednesday morning, and here it is Monday night, and what the devil is the trash gonna do good sitting on the side of the road on Tuesday? And then if I back up and I hit something, then it's gonna be his fault, and I know he's not gonna be willing to put the money up to pay for my rear bumper, and I'm not gonna claim it on my insurance because he's not about to make my premium go up over a trash can. I'm so sick of that girl. Every time I turn around, every time I say I'm ready to go out the door, what they do? Oh, mama, I need something to drink. Oh, mama, I need a snack. Oh, mama, I gotta go to the bathroom. Oh, mama, I can't find my shoes. Oh, you know, we get dressed and go out the door every morning. We've been doing the same thing for the last 7 years. Every morning at 7:05, and it ain't never changed. And she still ain't learned how to tell time and got a phone in her hand. Little stuff that will become a domino. That by the time you rest your head on your pillow at 9:30, not a single soul on earth has done anything to satisfy you. Because you got your blinders on, you got your magnet activated. Instead of the haters looking for you, you're looking for them. Because you expect them to be there. So you got your guard up. You didn't even need to take it out of the box. So in application to looking back at Jesus's walk on earth and his encounters and dealing with petty people, okay, let's go and look at John chapter 7. The story that I'm thinking of is what we all know it to be of the woman caught in adultery. That's the title that we all universally kind of recognize it under. That's the you know, as we have our parables and our stories and, you know, the prodigal sons and these types of things, when people say those phrases or those names or those titles, we automatically know the story and the line and the moral and where it's going. And we typically always hear this called the woman caught in adultery. And seeing as it's Women's Ministry Day, there's more to that story than her being caught in adultery. But yet all we ever recognize her for is that scarlet letter that's on her chest, and never the forgiveness that she departed that scene in. She entered the scene condemned. She stood there condemned. And even now, generations later, she remains condemned because we in our pettiness refuse to own her forgiveness. What if somebody felt like that towards us? We know that God forgives us 70 times 7. Or what if he said, I'm tired of 71? And so from this point on, all I will ever be known of is what sin I do from this point on, and not my repentance or my promise and right to righteousness. My admission to heaven is automatically denied just because I've been given a title or a label so that people can more easily remember or recognize me. And to be recognized more for your sin than your forgiveness, it's not a comfortable feeling. Thank goodness that that lady is not still here walking this earth to hear what we've done to her. So instead, I'd rather call her the forgiven adulteress. True, adultery was her sin, but she left that sin forgiven. And so I would like to, in my heavenly imagination, think that she remained forgiven. Because I would always want someone to think the best of me and give me the benefit of the doubt, even when I may not deserve it. So in essence, this story starts in John chapter 7, verse 53, which is the last verse of that chapter, and it goes and flows into John chapter 8. But when I was doing the research on this, it said that many manuscripts and original manuscripts of the Bible did not even include this story in its manuscript. So then I'm like, well, geez. Not only was the woman only known for generations as still being a sinner, in some manuscripts, she wasn't even significant enough to be mentioned. Yet her moral, or the moral of her story, rings volumes for those of us, each and every individual in this room. I want my story to be told. Even if it's just in the book of life, let somebody read my 2 lines and enjoy the narrative. So I know, like, being in church all the time, being in here since I was 4 years old and everything, when you read something, you got to kind of know or understand or study it in context. So that means you got to kind of backpedal a little bit. So John chapter 7, and I'll just give you the synopsis. John chapter 7 starts with Christ being in Galilee. And it's during the time of the Festival of Tabernacles. And it's a dangerous time because Jesus knows that he has those individuals out there who are just anxious to catch him in their snares, so that they can arrest him, accuse him, and kill him, because he is messing up their program. Period, point blank. He's throwing a wrench in what it is that they want to do, and they're not too pleased with this, i.e. the Pharisees and the legal scholars of the time. So while Jesus is there in Galilee, he's having a conversation with his brothers, and his brothers attempt to tell him, listen, if you want to be that person of prominence, to have a following that is willing to go with you and be willing to sacrifice themselves for you and what you are teaching, it makes more sense to do it in an open and where they can see, and not in secret. But that's where we have to now turn our petty shades on and see that his brothers were even being petty, because they weren't concerned with Jesus's safety and moving around the town of Galilee and going into Judea, which was full of Jews, every one of them having some ill will or ill content for him. They weren't concerned with his safety, and nobody was volunteering to be a bodyguard. They just simply wanted him to move about and to perform miracles to satisfy their own unbelief that they themselves were afraid to admit amongst one another for fear that they wouldn't look so loyal. So instead of manning up and saying, listen, I have questions within myself. I love you, Jesus, and I love everything that you're doing. But, some of the stuff that you say and you do, I just really haven't quite grasped it yet. No, instead they said, Jesus, go out and perform the miracles for the people in front of everybody. And that way you can gather and have a bigger crowd and we can do, they're giving him and pumping him with all of these self-made results to give themselves more comfort, more so than furthering the work of the kingdom. But Jesus is smarter than that. He's hip to the game. And he said to them in John chapter 7 and verse 6, my time is not yet here. For you, any time will do. And verse 7 says, the world cannot hate you, but it hates me because I testify that its works are evil. You go to the festival. I'm not going up to this festival because my time has not yet fully come. And so Jesus made the executive decision to stick to his guns, and he stayed on in Galilee while his brothers went ahead on down to Judea. Now, he later went on to Judea in his own time and in secret, so as to not draw attention and maintain his safety amongst the vipers. He didn't feed into the desires of his brothers for their unbelief or for what was to be their own problem, because he didn't essentially have anything to prove to them. Teachable moment. There will always be those individuals who will declare themselves to be your biggest support system or to be equally yoked with you, yet deep down within they harbor the largest cynicism and doubt or distrust in your path and walk in life. They're low-key your biggest haters. Keep your friends close and your enemies closer. They'll offer you up this advice or this constructive criticism to propel you towards an action or decision that within your spirit you feel does not have your best interest at heart. And we sometimes call this peer pressure, and it happens at every age and every stage. It's not just with the teenagers and the young folks. They will do or say what they can to cause you to do things that will give them more certainty, assurance, and smooth away doubts about your life path and your destiny and your purpose and reason for being, yet they don't even possess a morsel of the courage that you have in making monumental life choices. You don't have to reassure someone else of your life's risks while they sit on the sidelines and play it safe just because they want to vicariously live their life wearing your medals of achievement. There's no reward without risk. And if they are not brave enough to take on risk, then they need to be a quiet spectator. And they don't need to try to co-pilot or even backseat drive your life. So that childish pettiness, keep a child in a child's place. Okay. Now, further down in chapter 7 of John, we see that Jesus eventually makes his way to the temples in Judea to teach while the festival continues. And then the Jews were amazed at the wealth of knowledge and the depth of spirit and conviction with which Jesus delivered his message to them. They asked, so to speak, how can he know so much, yet he himself was never taught? And Jesus answered them by saying, starting with verse 16, my teaching is not my own. It comes from the one who sent me. Anyone who chooses to do the will of God will find out whether my teaching comes from God or whether I speak on my own. Whoever speaks on their own does so to gain personal glory. But he who seeks the glory of the one who sent him is a man of truth. There's nothing false about him. Has not Moses given you the law? Yet not one of you keeps the law. Why are you trying to kill me? Now, Jesus then has to deal with the attitudes of the people changing from awe to petty. Something about that attitude of sarcasm and the many attempts to bait an argument with him and to stir up strife by stooping to name calling and blasphemy for him saying, and who are you? That's merely a projection of narcissism that they had onto his meek individual spirit, and what some might also call gaslighting. But in stride, he goes on to say, starting in verse 21, I did one miracle, and you all are amazed. Yet because Moses gave you circumcision, though actually it didn't come from Moses, but from the patriarchs, you circumcise a boy on the Sabbath. Now, if a boy can be circumcised on the Sabbath so that the law of Moses may not be broken, why are you angry with me for healing a man's whole body on the Sabbath? Stop judging me by mere appearances, but instead judge correctly. Mic drop. Now, in saying that, place it in the back of your mind, Jesus's reference to the Mosaic law. While we fast forward a bit, going into John 8, and now we're into our forgiven adulteress. John chapter 8. John chapter 8 and verse 1. After all this arguments and all this stuff has gone on at the end of chapter 7, and the people who have gathered to hear Jesus' teachings have somewhat dissipated and departed, it says, but Jesus went on to Mount Olives. In verse 2, at dawn, he appeared in the temple courts where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. And the teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, Teacher, this woman was caught in the act of adultery. Verse 5, in the law, Moses commanded us to stone such women. Now, what do you say? Verse 6, they were using this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. And verse 7 says, when they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her. Verse 8, again, he stooped down and he wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left. With the woman still standing there, Jesus straightened up and asked her, woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you? Verse 11 says, no one, sir, she said. Then neither do I condemn you, Jesus declared. Go now and leave your life of sin. That's all from the New International Version. And again, like I said, I like to read stuff in the Message version because it sounds novel-esque. And it said, Jesus went across to Mount Olives, but he was soon back to the temple again. And so swarms of people came to him, and he sat down and began to teach them. And the religion scholars and the Pharisees let in a woman who had been caught in an act of adultery. And they stood her in plain sight, and everyone said, "Teacher, this woman was caught red-handed in the act of adultery. And Moses in the law gives orders to stone such persons. So what do you say?" They were trying to trap him into saying something incriminating so that they could bring charges against him. Jesus bent down and wrote with his finger in the dirt, and they kept at him, badgering him. And he straightened up and he said, "The sinless one among you, go first, throw the stone." Bending down again, he wrote some more in the dirt. Hearing that, they walked away, one after another, beginning with the oldest. The woman was left alone, and Jesus stood up and spoke to her. "Woman, where are they? Does no one condemn you?" And she says, "No one, Master." "Neither do I," said Jesus. "Go on your way, and from now on, don't sin." So in both of those translations, we see that Jesus was back at his what he does best in teaching in the temple. And in continuing on with what's going on around them during the Festival of Tabernacles, and the Pharisees taking the opportunity that they have at hand to try to accuse, convict, and condemn Jesus. You know, sometimes you have those innocent bystanders that just get caught up in the situation, you know, but some people that they just get caught up, but they have to be collateral damage so that they can so that you can achieve your ultimate goal. So my poor forgiven woman became collateral damage to them. They didn't care about her. The Mosaic law said that she was to be stoned. It even says it in Leviticus 20:10. If a man commits adultery with another man's wife, the wife saith his neighbor, both the man and the woman, the adulterer and the adulteress, must be put to death. So then I think I heard that clearly, that the Mosaic law says the adulterer and the adulteress must be brought and condemned and stoned. And they, being Pharisees and don't like to be proven wrong, said that they caught her red-handed in the act. And I don't think she was committing adultery alone. So where's John Doe? Why she had to be the collateral damage and he can't get stoned too? It's Women's Ministry Day. I mean, you know, a stone for a stone. She ain't no more evil than him. And she wasn't alone. Ding, 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 pettiness. Were they peeping around the door, waiting for somebody to do something so that they could just watch and see? And then as soon as the act happened, they was right there ready to pounce on her and arrest her. You got nothing better to do with your time but to be lurking in the corners and in the shadows where you know folks are about to commit sin, because you know we have our little sinful areas in every town and every township and everything. You know, people know what street to avoid and what street to go down because of those dens of iniquity. So y'all so holier than thou, but you hanging around the edge of the corner of the den of iniquity just so you can rope up somebody and use them. And dangle them as a night crawler on the end of that fishing pole so that you can go for the bigger fish. But it was supposed to be 2 poles in that water. Feel some type of way about that. Not only was she only now still known as the woman caught in adultery, but she got caught alone. That's not fair. I digress. It's Women's Ministry. But I stand for you, sister. Now, the Pharisees, in essence, wanted Jesus to make a decision. If he were to speak and say, that she were to be condemned, then they would in essence be able to call him out on that decision, because it says that he would be accused of condemning someone to death without the approval of the Roman government. He had no such authority. Then he therefore would be accused before the Roman authorities and be submersive to the law, to which the Pharisees and the legal scribes would be able to use against him and order him to death. She's collateral damage, standing alone for the bigger fish. But then if he says that the woman should not be stoned, then he would be cornered as being known as an enemy of the Mosaic law. And how can you, as a ruler, forfeit the Mosaic law of which is your basis? So see, Jesus had a sticky situation on his hands. And so he needed that time to decide how he was going to approach them and make the most out of this teachable moment. Also, his writing down on the ground gave the woman time to grasp and collect herself, because I'm sure she was a bit frazzled and not knowing what was going on, because she got caught up in the middle of her mess. And so her mind was going a million miles an hour, not knowing whether she was going to be condemned, not condemned. Jesus going to save me, is he not going to save me? Who are these people? Why did and it's just a whole bunch of mess going on at one time. So it gave her time to collect her thoughts, to decide whether she wanted to have self-pity and or an attitude of repentance. And ultimately, it gave Jesus time to put down those sins that those accusers, those committers of sin, had forgotten that they themselves had committed. You know, judge not lest ye be judged, but it's so convenient that you forget about all the foolishness and all the hell you raised when you pointing the finger at somebody else. How it's so easy to see the splinter in somebody else's eye, but you blatantly ignore the mote in your own. How you don't see those other three fingers pointing back at you as you drug this poor woman here. Oh, but your sins don't matter though, because your sins aren't the ones on the end of the hook, on the end of the fishing pole to bait Jesus. So those things we're supposed to just bypass and turn a blind eye to. Because your sin is no better or no worse than mine. And so in this writing on the ground that Jesus is doing, and in the regaining of his authority in the situation, writing with his finger, just as his father wrote the 10 Commandments on the tablets of stone with his finger, the woman has a front row seat vantage point to see all those sins that Jesus is writing down there. My little heavenly cinematic mind says, who's to say some of those sins that Jesus wrote on the ground that those Pharisees committed weren't committed with her? Or is that why you wanted her killed and weren't worried about John Doe, because you just wanted her mouth to be closed because y'all was doing something that you had no business doing with her anyway? But I digress. So she gets a front row seat to see the negatives of her accusers and how their pedestal that they place themselves on starts to slowly crumble to the wayside. And as the accusers push in more, Jesus, do you not hear us? What are you going to do? She needs to be stoned, or else you're going to say that the Mosaic law is a lie. Come on, Jesus, we need a decision here. You know, you got a lot of people watching, and they're trying to take the path of life and the choices that they make based on your decision, Jesus. It's not going to be forced. We don't have the power on this earth to force Jesus' hand to move a half a nanosecond faster than what he wants to do. And in his own sweet time, he stood and he said, now the first one of you without a sin, throw the stone. And as the accusers begin to, it begins to dawn on them that those letters and words and phrases put together in that dirt on that temple floor, then spelled out their names and read like the novel of their life. There's nothing worse than an old fool. And so the Pharisees depart, old ones first, because they weren't about to have any more old fools. Slowly but surely. But Jesus, he's fair. He went back down. He finished writing everything he had to put down there. Don't leave anybody out. Unlike you Pharisees who left John Doe to the side because he wasn't enough of a matter of collateral damage, I'm not gonna leave none of y'all out. And slowly but surely, the accusers dissipate. Woman, where art thou accusers? No one's here, master. Then go and sin no more. Amen. Amen. Jesus was smart enough to turn the table and the double trap that was set against him back on them and save a soul at the same time. Tell me that's not a God that sits high and looks low, plays chess, not checkers, and knows how and where to order our steps so that we can look up and not see our accusers at each and every turn of each and every minute of each and every day of our lives. But we have to also in turn understand and know that we have to shed pettiness. A snake can shed its skin as it grows, but a leopard can't change its spots, no matter how big it gets. So you have to decide, do you want to be a snake who sheds and changes and grows and gets something new at every turn? Or this leopard whose pelt is comfortable and soft and luscious, but yet maintains its old scars from the past? I mean, I hate snakes. I ain't gonna lie to you. I think if I saw a snake right here, like somebody better lay me down because I'm gonna have a heart attack. But in this essence and in this situation, I think I'd rather shed my skin. You know what I'm saying? Got to go. So when I started out, I had that acronym of petty being poisonous. What did I say? It was poisonous energy targeted and terrorizing you. As we now think of ourselves and align ourselves with this new forgiven adulteress, and in having to deal with petty people at every turn, maybe we can have another acronym for petty. And it's pray every time temptation yells. Or prioritize eternal thoughts and talks in yourself. So don't be so quick to get mad at the neighbor for his trash cans, or the kids who keep skating up and down the sidewalk and causing the corners of the sidewalk to chip. And then when you go to walk the dog, you stumble in the dark because you can't see and all the other stuff. Right. When that feeling of negativity and that when you feel like you've lost the remote control, and not the remote control that's on your couch or in between your couch cushions, but when you've lost that remote control to your eternal and internal emotions and mental health and thought processes because you've allowed somebody else on the outside who has nothing but childish tendencies and who doesn't have a mind older than a 5-year-old, even though they're in a 55-year-old body. Pray for them. And to prioritize your thoughts to be that of eternity and have positive self-talks in yourself. So I'm thankful that God isn't as petty as we are in this state, but in what our new pettiness will be, I'm excited.